Hi, my name is Mpoma Shego, bringing you nothing but the freshest news and entertainment in and around the city. Over the past 2 days, people from across the region came out to Gauteng Estate in Midrand to engage on the Gauteng Infrastructure Investment Conference. Rashina Mohammed has more on this.
How is Gauteng attracting investment to realize its transformation, reindustrialization and modernization goals? Well, that is the central focus at the Gauteng Infrastructure Investment Conference. In the words of Gauteng Premier David Makura, world-class infrastructure are the veins and arteries of any modern economy.
Spend will also contribute 12.4 billion rands to government revenue and add another 31 billion.
The study further indicates that for every 1 rand spent on infrastructure, an additional 92 cents are added to the Gauteng economy. So we still have a long journey to go, because connectivity today is as important as having access to public transport, to water, to electricity. It's the lifeblood of any modern economy. To make sure that Gauteng attracts investment, our provincial government has just approved last week a set of incentives, administrative and technical incentives for business expansion and retention in specific corridors of our province, incentives to support R&D, incentives to also support clusters and export development in different areas of our province, and lastly, incentives to attract businesses into the townships. So all these incentives are provincial and municipal incentives. They exclude the DTI incentives. So we don't have a lot of money, so we can't give money. We know that the DTI minister is able to incentivize sectors and industries and firms at a certain level. So ladies and gentlemen, Gauteng is ready for business.
How ambitious is Gauteng's goals when it comes to transforming the province, reindustrializing it and modernizing it?
I think any plan or vision of that size has to be looked at very carefully. It has a lot of merits, but it also has a lot of requirements in terms of resources, participation, engagement. I think the importance of the private sector as partners, as collaborators, hasn't been fully realized. The state, and I use their national, provincial and municipal, are looking at trying to do the stuff themselves. And I think it's important they realize that there are a huge amount of resources, interest and excitement about the possibility of the private sector getting involved. And proper, meaningful consultation is what is required. We hear about projects, next thing they're on the ground, and there hasn't really been a participative process. And as a result, I think a lot of opportunities are lost. I think the proponents of development tend to see participation as an opportunity for the resistance. And my go on this is that they need to look at us as a resource. We're not the resistance, we want to work. We want to work and make the city work and make the country work. The Gauteng City Region, the projects, the megacity projects, they have some merit. But then one has to look at the spatial distributions. One has to look at how the province is actually promoting high density living outside urban development boundaries, as opposed to investing in the inner cities and doing a lot of brownfield development, upgrading existing infrastructure to allow for higher densities in the urban areas. To take development out onto peripheral areas, spread it out over large areas, is very wasteful in terms of space, infrastructure and resources. While we do all the capital investment and we get all of that on the ground, it's a huge additional cost from an operational and management and maintenance point of view. And it adds additional services which now need to be maintained. Instead of taking existing infrastructure, upgrading that and making better use of it, and concentrating our focus on getting the inner cities and the urban areas that are going through huge degeneration processes at the moment into a better state for the people who are living there. I think there could definitely be better buy-in if there'd been better consultation. Obviously we're living with a legacy in terms of urban development and spatial arrangements, and we do need to address those. I think we're tending to focus on transport and infrastructure, and we need to look at spatial changes. So, for example, the mining belts in the south of Joburg, bringing jobs and economic development closer to where people are living, will address a lot of the issues in terms of we don't need as much transport infrastructure. And I think it's that sort of thinking which we need to open up in terms of discussion and participation. And we're tending to put people on the periphery still. You know, if you look at some of the projects and the models that are on display here, they're on the periphery of urban areas. They're not on the inner areas. And with the consultation, with participation, a lot of those spatial inadequacies can be more properly addressed, and we can get a more efficient and sustainable future urban development area.
What needs to be done differently when it comes to financing infrastructure projects in Gauteng?
Well, I think there's a lot of projects, lots of potential. There also is a lot of funding that could be made available. So I think it's just the partnerships that puts the opportunities together with the resources. The province is doing a lot to create the institutions to do that, but it's essentially just sort of putting the right projects with the right partners at the right time together. And of course the right funding instruments together that just makes it work. So it's all there. It's just a matter of helping them find each other and have the right agreements.
Some experts say when it comes to funding infrastructure projects, it's not due to a lack of capital flow in Africa, but it's due to a lack of bankable projects. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there are a lot of bankable projects. So I think it's true and it's also not true, because the projects can be made bankable with the right sort of support. So it's there. So for example, the project is very bankable. They just haven't connected with the right lender that can offer the right terms, or it's not bankable because the partners who can de-risk the project by doing some of the early stage development or giving some of the offtake agreements and so on aren't there. They might just be across the road. So it's really how you put them together. You know, when Johannesburg put out a green bond, it was oversubscribed massively. And so the funds are there. And now if Gauteng had to take that same Joburg experience and just make it better by saying, here's a list of very carefully thought through projects, we're raising money for those projects, there wouldn't be any problem raising the money.
State-of-the-art infrastructure improves the quality of life for citizens. In fact, it has a multiplier effect that goes way beyond the initial investment. So the question is, how does an economy attract and sustain investment during an economic downturn?
Are we utilizing credit guarantees and stretching them to the best of our ability?
Is Gauteng actually spending the money set aside for infrastructure development?
Well, there are two types of infrastructure capital money in Gauteng. One is allocated to municipalities for top structures, for all other grants that are due to municipalities. Those are spent in municipalities but are accounted for in the province. But secondly is the project funding for the province itself. And the province is spending, because I know we've run out of housing funds, they've run out of road infrastructure funds. It's not enough for a province like Gauteng. We actually need enough more from national, because now there's a downturn in the economy. You need counter-cyclical spending. So you spend when no one else is spending, so that we can then encourage them to spend. So how do you spend is that you still sustain the industries that are struggling, and then you hope the private sector will follow. So it's just hope. So what do you do then? You entice them and say, look, I'll give you returns of X, we'll give you rates holiday, we'll give you all sorts of incentives that come with what government can do to entice private sector to spend.
Given the recent downgrades, what can a province like Gauteng do to improve, again, investor appetite?
Well, Gauteng is not in the debt capital market, so it's not rated. It doesn't have a rating. What is rated is sovereign. Now, if sovereign is downgraded, it means subnational is affected as well. So the amount of money available in the country, it's either too expensive or it contracts. So that affects Gauteng in its totality.
Panel discussions will continue on day 2 of the conference. Nashina Mohammed for Joburg Today.
For more insightful conversations on the Gauteng infrastructure development, do join us on Business Destination Joburg on Monday. From me, Mpoma Shehu, and the Joburg Today.tv crew, goodbye.